This is the Enoch Show, America's most controversial podcast, coming to you live from UNT with
Lee Pierce,
Brock Bergen,
and Jackson Carter Bullmeyer.
Man. I wanted to just lead right off into the issue of Israel. Man, just chaos there, guys. Just utter chaos. Just so many people have died. What a just tragedy. What a horrible situation. Something I want to just say before we segue into some of the issues tonight is there's got to be a two-state solution because, here's the issue. You have all these Palestinians crammed in an open, almost like an open prison scenario indefinitely. And after a while, they want to get out of there. And Israel didn't seem like they're doing much to get them out of there.
Well, it's not even necessarily that they want to get out of there. It's just they want to stop being constantly harassed and harangued and, basically treated like, animals in a pen.
Granted. Now, I don't agree with what Hamas did, decapitating children, assaulting women, decapitating elderly people. The response is not justified, but I can understand kind of the issues involved here. So a younger version of myself would have just been all pro-Israel and just, smash Hamas. But I've been kind of lightly treading on this issue because I'm trying to see it from both ways. But that's not the topic of the show tonight. But I'm not one to shun major issues here on this show. We've never done that before. Also, Jim Jordan lost in the first ballot of trying to be the Speaker of the House. I'm not sure if that's going to work. He's got a significant opposition within the Republican Party that are not MAGA Republicans. He is the consummate MAGA Republican who's trying to vie to be the Speaker of the House, and there might be endless ballots, and we'll see about that. But something happened to our very own Brock. Brock Bergen, our sports guy, got robbed yesterday.
Yep.
All right, so man, before we have Pastor Brent on here, we talk about a little sports and get into the issues that why we had him on here tonight. What happened, Brock?
So basically, yesterday I was walking outside the student union, just minding my own business, whatnot. These two, I don't like these two like young African American males. I'll just call them that for now. And then those two, they come up to me saying that they want to promote their black business of selling cologne. So I felt that it'd be rude if I tried like brushing them off. I didn't want to be rude or anything. I just was like, okay, sure. What's up? I'll support it if you want. And then like they lead me over to like the bus stop that's over outside the Union area. The one guy says he needs to go over to his car to get his other phone because Cash App won't work or something. So that guy goes to his car. The other guy, he's leading me to his friend's car. He's on the phone with his friend. He says that his car will be up here in a little bit. Let's go through the payment right now and all that. So then he goes on to ask me he asked me like borrow my phone. He's like, yo, let me borrow your phone real quick so I can put in the payment details. So reluctantly I did. And as soon as I did that, he took off and ran. He took off, he bolted, he ran, he's gone. So I talked to some police officers. We figured out that those two tried embezzling over $1,000 out of my debit card to whatever their scam business is all about, which it is a scam. They just use like store-bought cologne and passed off as their own. So they tried that, and luckily we were able to get the bank accounts frozen, the transaction canceled. We set up something to where if they try to sell the phone, I'm lucky that the phone was dead because who knows what else they could have done if it was even more alive. Because we figured out something to where if they try selling the phone or whatever, it's going to ping that location to the police. So all I'm going to say is there is just no place at all on this college campus one bit for just low lifes like those two. There needs to be an example made out of like just people like that. I don't want to see like I'm advocating for something horrific to happen, but at the same time, there needs to be less of this. These people weren't even students here. There needs to be just some kind of way that there's a way to prevent these kind of people from just roaming the streets of this campus in general.
Just a couple questions I have is that first, I mean, really sorry that happened to you, man.
So, yep.
I think it could have got worse. It could have been worse.
A lot.
Okay, so another thing, man, is don't be so trusting.
Absolutely. Like normally when there's been a few instances of people like coming up to me and trying to talk to me on campus. Usually it's about like their like organization. Usually it's about like religion or whatever. But just these two pathetic lowlifes, I'm just not going to give anybody the time of day after that.
So
not at all.
How did they get your bank information?
So there's like this app called Zelle that's hooked to like Wells Fargo. I had it open because I was going to pay them like $1 or whatever because they were pretty much just goading me into doing so. So I had the app open, and like as soon as like I had the app open, this dude just takes the phone, runs off, and I guess he tried just stealing money out of my own account to do so for his own fake business. So we figured out so allegedly, even then, another thing we figured out is that apparently there was an incident like this last week, and the story that happened last week aligns a lot with the one yesterday. So this wouldn't be the first instance these two just criminals were just roaming around here.
Well, Brock, I am sorry this happened to you, man, and I'm probably the first person to write an op-ed in the newspaper here at UNT to defend you, man. Obviously we've got to move on from that, man. But I just want to check in on you. You're doing all right, man. I mean, because you're one of our own.
I'm doing all right.
You're one of our sports guys. We don't want to, man. I mean, I feel bad about that. We'll talk more about that, but
I do have.
You're my guy.
I do have one question.
What's up?
I mean, that's really horrible, but like, so you didn't get any cologne.
Well, turns out, so what I did, like, the dude like handed me over the thing to like sample it or whatever, and I put it in my bag after that. Like the police have it now. They're gonna probably like determine like fingerprints and stuff, and that's that too. But yeah, it's just like what was I gonna say?
Like Walmart brand.
Yeah, it was like
something.
Walmart, some kind of store-bought brand. It was like fake or whatever. But yeah, there just needs to just be an example, man. People like that.
I hate to tell you this, Pastor Brent and I, we tend to. I don't hate to tell you that we go to a church. I hate to tell you that we go to a church in downtown Fort Worth. Now, Pastor Brent's heart is a lot more softer than mine to the Lord, but it's a rough place. Yeah, I used to have to take a bus and trains and stuff to get to church. Because it's 50 miles from here, right? And you got to put your game face on a lot of times when you're downtown Fort Worth because there's a lot of shady stuff going on, right? So you got to learn, man, dude. Don't be giving your information out to anybody.
You're right, and I'll end it with this: those two will get what's coming. They're gonna get what's coming.
Well, hopefully, get the gospel of Jesus Christ that they can be saved through Christ. But
God is always watching.
Well, let's segue. And I feel really bad that this occurred, Brock. But we're going to move on to some sports issues. Lee.
Yes.
Who's the front runner for the Heisman?
So right now it's Michael Penix Jr. out of the University of Washington. He's left-handed senior year, or he's a COVID senior he transferred from Indiana, left-handed. He currently has, I think he's like second in the nation passing yards behind Shedeur Sanders, 2,300 yards, 20 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions. He's been absolutely phenomenal. He's probably the main reason that Washington is 6-0 right now.
They beat Oregon too.
Yes, they beat Oregon last week, which was a really big game, really big rivalry. And it's one of those things that if you're going to win the Heisman as a quarterback out of Washington, that's one of the games you have to win, is the game against Oregon and probably the game against USC. He was also 8th in the Heisman race in 2022. So he's been around the last 2 years. He's been really good. He was really good at Indiana. He just kept getting injured. And since he got to Washington, he's been absolutely phenomenal. He's been able to stay on the field. He's risen his draft stock immensely, that he might be a first-round pick in April of next year.
So what about the quarterback for Oklahoma? obviously had a big victory over Texas, University of Texas. So what's his name?
Dylan Gabriel. He is currently second in Heisman odds right now, behind Penix. He's also left-handed, which I don't know the last time that we had two left-handed quarterbacks as 1 and 2 in the Heisman race. I don't know if that's ever happened.
Yeah.
He has 1,800 passing yards, 16 passing touchdowns. He also has 5 rushing touchdowns. He's a dual threat guy. He's probably not athletic enough that if you were to make the jump to the NFL, that it would work out for him, because he is only probably, I think he's around
5'11".
5'11", yeah. But another thing is, as I said with the Oregon-Washington game, beating Texas as the Oklahoma quarterback, and if you're a Heisman contender, that's something that you have to do. That's why Quinn Ewers dropped so far since they lost that game, because Quinn Ewers, I believe, was in the top 5 of the Heisman race going into that game, and to drop that game as a Texas quarterback is basically a death nail in the coffin of a Heisman contender.
So just let everybody know out there, Brock and Lee have a new podcast at UNT, Fifth and Goal.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, all the guys in the studio are either classmates or students of mine.
Yeah.
Not classmates, students of mine. My Friday lab that I teach over the years, and I'm thankful to have you guys on. They expressed desire to do podcasting. Hockey is a big sport for Pastor Brent, way beyond me and my knowledge of hockey. But so Brock, so who do you think how did the Stars look this year?
They I think they play their road opener tonight against the defending champs Golden Knights tonight.
So Pastor Brent, let you guys know, Pastor Brent Christian is always kind of ironic. Brent Christian, he's a Christian,
Yeah. Very ironic.
Graduated from Colorado State University, and Denver Theological Seminary.
Yep.
But also attended for a couple of years Reformed Theological Seminary down in Jackson, Mississippi. Is that correct, Pastor Brent? I guess
that is correct.
And he is a Anglican pastor. He's been a good friend of mine last few years, you guys. And he's very knowledgeable about the Reformation, things of that nature, but he has scary knowledge about the Colorado Avalanche.
Oh, really?
He got about
That's right.
8 of us one time last year to go to a Avalanche versus Stars game. So the Stars objectively, does Colorado have another chance to win the Stanley Cup this year, or who's the favorite this year, Pastor Brent?
Yeah, right now I think it's fair to say it's either going to be, all things being equal, it's probably Vegas or the Avalanche are probably the top contenders. I think the Stars are very close in that. I edge the Avalanche over both of those teams because they're very hungry. They're healthy. And they added a lot of good components, really interesting components they added, especially Druin on line 1 with Nathan McKinnon. They were in junior hockeys together. And Nathan McKinnon, of course, went number 1 in the draft pick and is one of the best players in the league. Druin went number 3 in the same draft and has not been as successful. So reuniting them
it's going to
be pretty interesting. Yeah. But in hockey, it's all about the injuries. So as long as those 3 teams can stay healthy, it should be a really fun season in the West. I think the West is going to win the Stanley Cup again, whoever comes out alive at the end.
Go ahead.
So I have a question. It goes more towards the East, but we know that the Boston Bruins, I believe that they set the record for goals scored last season.
Yep.
Obviously blew a embarrassing series, the Florida Panthers, who were the 8th seed last year. Do you think that the Boston Bruins have a chance this year at all?
Yeah, I think so. I think they have really good goaltending, and if you have good goaltending, you always have a chance. They're not the same team. I know they've lost a couple of their guys, but they still have the core. And again, I think if they can stay healthy, They're going to be fine. I mean, the number one rule right now in hockey for like the modern era is you don't want to finish number one in points in the league. The Avalanche did that. The Avalanche did that 3 years ago. They were the top contender. They were like Boston, not as good as Boston was last year, but they were still very good. And they got knocked out in the second round by Vegas. And then 2 years ago is when the Avalanche won, but they came in as the number 2 seed. And you kind of want to. It doesn't usually go well for the team that gets the Conn Smythe trophy at the end of the season. They usually get knocked out in the first or second round.
Actually, I have one question real quick. How are you feeling about the Rangers this season? I feel this is going to be a bounce back season. I feel more optimistic about this team.
Oh, the
New York Rangers.
Absolutely, yeah. I would love to see the Rangers bounce back. Like I would love to see them or Carolina maybe, push. And if neither of those teams do it, I would love to see a Canadian team finally make it. So like if the Avalanche get knocked out and if like the Rangers or Carolina get knocked out in the East, I would love to see a Canadian teams make it to the Stanley Cup, because it's been a long time since a Canadian team has made it to the Stanley Cup Finals.
Vancouver, right?
It is their sport. So
didn't Vancouver when they had those two twin brothers?
Right, that was in 2011, and then Montreal made it in 2021.
And Edmonton probably has the best player in the sport / 20 years. He might be better than Sidney Crosby ever was.
Yeah.
I'm blanking on his name right now.
Connor McDavid.
That's him. Yeah, Connor McDavid is an absolute. He might be the best player in sports in general right now.
He is. Yep.
Yeah, very true. I think what Edmonton needs though is a defense. So
that's plagued them just for the past 2 seasons. It's
kind of like the NFL, it really probably true of most sports is if you don't have a defense, you're not going to go deep. You're not going to win a championship. So you don't have to have the best defense, but if you can have at least an average defense, especially with Connor McDavid on the offense, like you're going to be really competitive. But their first 2 games, they have the same problems. I mean, they lost 2 games in a row to Vancouver Canucks, which is a rebuild team. So I think Edmonton, if you're an Edmonton fan, you're probably terrified that this is the repeat of, 2 years in a row. Same thing's going to happen. So
doesn't Toronto have a really good player too?
Austin Matthews.
Yeah. Austin Matthews.
2 hat tricks in a row.
Yeah.
For the first 2 games of the season, I think.
That
pretty impressive.
Hey, we would really be a breaking news contemporary issue show if we didn't talk about the baseball just for a real quick thing. Now, I'm not going to lie to you guys. My personality, I'm getting older now in my life, but my personality is really similar to Bryce Harper. I love the zeal. I love the passion. I love that guy, but he steps it up in a phenomenal way in the playoffs. They're saying that he's got 9 runs scored or something already in the playoffs. I mean, he hit a home run again yesterday.
Yep, he's homered in 3 consecutive games, I think.
Yeah, he's having a phenomenal. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I'm gonna go out on a limb here, and I want to see Philadelphia go to the World Series. Now, obviously, we're in a shadow of the Texas Rangers here, right? So they've won 2 games. I don't know one player on that team.
Marcus Semien, he's a great player. Too. Corey Seager. Probably Corey Seager. I've been talking about it. Some of the guys in my fraternity, they're talking about Corey Seager for MVP. Shohei Ohtani obviously had a historic season, but he missed, I think, the last 2 months of the season. So they've been talking about Corey Seager as MVP.
He should be.
And then you have obviously Max Scherzer coming back from injury for this ALCS series. And that's the only thing with the Rangers is their bullpen is weak.
Aroldis Chapman, Josh Sborz.
But Chapman is pretty good though, right? When he's on, he's on. He still throws 100 miles an hour, right?
That's true, but it's more often that he's not on when he's on. Even then he came in for game 1 and game 2 and almost blew both of them. So
up 2-0 against the Astros in Houston is a very big deal. Houston is an insane environment, especially in the playoffs and the ALCS.
I hate Houston Astros. Can I say that publicly?
No, that's totally
Jackson. How do you feel about them?
I hate the Houston Astros.
Kind of the same way.
Can I say that publicly?
Kind of the same way.
Dodgers.
Beating on trash cans.
Yeah.
They should have got that World Series revoked.
Really,
baseball is like weak and their punishment. That they complete it made the World Series like batting practice.
Yeah.
The Yankees were a stronger team that year, and they lost out to Houston Astros in the playoffs because they knew what pitches were coming. That just turns baseball into a Jackson, do you want to say something before we segue over to Pastor Brent?
Gosh, not about sports. Keep me out of this one. I don't know.
What have you been looking at lately? So just let Pastor Brent know. These are my guys. These guys are all brand new podcasters. Brock's been with me for almost over a year now, right?
Pretty much.
But these guys are getting into it, loving the radio and stuff. So what's your show all about? You're out there with some esoteric stuff.
Yeah, I talked to a practitioner of folk magic, and it was a really long interview. Apparently episodes are only supposed to be 45 minutes long, and my experience on this show did not I didn't realize that, because we always go on for like an hour.
They might split it into a couple episodes.
It's going to be 2 episodes. Those are going to be the first 2. It was a really great interview. I've just got to edit it up a little bit, and I'm really excited to get it put out there. I mean,
there is a trend towards long form podcasting. I think there are a couple shows out there where they'll go like 2 hours sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I would, I'm not averse to really long entertainment, but
if you have the right niche, right, you could do it.
It'll be better. It'll go over a little bit better if you keep it a bit more succinct, probably.
I listen to podcasts like you would a TV show. I listen to a couple of sports podcasts every day that they're on. That's the first thing I do in the morning. And they're both like one of them is not really a sports podcast. It's a Barstool podcast. It's got Arian Foster, former NFL player, on it, and
University of Tennessee.
Yes, sir. And it's called Macrodosing. It's a great podcast, but it covers like conspiracy theories. Sometimes they talk about sports. It talks all kinds of stuff. They have a guy that is a Tennessee graduate, so they always talk Tennessee football as well when Tennessee football's on. So they go for 3 hours on an episode, and I honestly they're telling us with ours that people kind of fade off after 45 minutes. I was like, I don't really experience that, because when I'm engaged with the podcast, because I have like my AirPods in, I'm listening to it. I listen to I feel like it's closer to my brain, you know what I'm saying, than like a TV show that you're watching from a TV, whatever. If I'm interested in what they're talking about, I'm engaged like for that entire 3 hours. I could tell you probably like word for word what they said. And I definitely think that long form podcasting is becoming the new normal. I don't like when a show is only like 45 minutes long. It feels like it's like 5 minutes to me.
Yeah. There is a market for it, Ethan. There is a market for it.
Well, let's get right into the topic of the evening. We're honored to have Pastor Brent Christian from St. Andrew's Anglican Church in downtown Fort Worth, a historic Anglican church that has an evangelical and reformed tradition. Well, he'll explain those terms. I asked him to come on. He's been a blessing to me over the last few years. Some of you guys know I went through some massive family trials, and there's guys, man, I'm not gonna lie to you. You know how somebody like Brock yesterday, like you get like a car accident or a robbery or something, and you don't even know. Think of a car accident, and you don't even know what's going on around you. Everything's like in slow motion.
Yep.
Lee. Like that's been my life for a couple of years. And all I said to myself is, man, you guys know I'm a Christian. I have strong faith in Jesus Christ. Now, I could be a lot stronger. I could be in the Bible a lot more than I am. But I don't shirk back. I'm not apologetic about my Christian faith. But I'll be honest with you guys, my life's been kind of like that car accident where something severe happened to me. And all I said to myself is, you know what? What church do I really want to go to in Fort Worth? Now, I'm not really into like loud bands and men with skinny jeans up there. That's not really my scene. I said one church I really, really appreciate is St. Andrew's Anglican Church in downtown Fort Worth. So I calmed down. I hadn't been there in a few years because I went off to Prince's Seminary after I graduated from Southwestern Baptist down there in Fort Worth. I come back and there's a whole new leadership. Pastor Bill Dixon's not there. McKeechee's not there. I don't even know who these guys are, but I was just listening to them, and it was very solid. So I got to know Pastor Brent over this time, last few years here, and he's giving me a lot of solid counsel. And something that's going on in October for a lot of Christians is the issue of the Reformation. On October 30th, Pastor Brent, a lot of people celebrate not Martin Luther King, the famous civil rights activist, but Martin Luther, the famous German reformer who nailed the 95 Theses on a Wittenberg door. They celebrate that. I asked him to come on and explain what that meant. To a lot of people, October is like, okay, fall festivals, Halloween, the Great Pumpkin. I'm not gonna lie, you guys read kind of before your time, Peanuts.
Yeah, I mean, those the movies at least are a huge part of my childhood.
My parents used to put those on every holiday. We'd watch
Christmas.
Christmas, great. They're classic.
But believe it or not, one of the most important things in Western civilization that ever occurred was Martin Luther nailing those 95 Theses on a Wittenberg door, and the Protestant Reformation was on like Donkey Kong. Okay. So Pastor Brent, tell us a little about yourself and how you became a pastor in downtown Fort Worth from Colorado.
Oh, wow. How long do I have?
Well, give you a few minutes to talk about that, and then we're going to get into Reformation is all about and all that.
Yeah, so I did not, being a pastor was not on my list of career moves or what I wanted to do. So I was at Colorado State University many years ago, back in the 90s, when the Avalanche moved to Colorado. And I was studying microbiology, wanted to be a doctor, and had a friend who just kept annoying me and saying that he thought I'd be good working in the church. So I had just become a new follower of Christ right before I went into college. And so I resisted my friends, said, no way, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, I do not want to work in a church. But they had this internship at his church. And so he kept giving me an application. And finally, just to get him off my back, I filled out the application and sent it in. But I slanted it. So, like, there's no way this church is going to call me back. And sure enough, they called me back and said, hey, we want to do an interview. And I was like, oh, man. So I do this interview, and through the interview process, I warmed up to the idea to just do this summer internship. And besides, it was in a mountain town that I wanted to go spend some time in to do some kayaking and rock climbing. So I did that for the summer, and God used that church community. They were a very gospel, meaning just a community of good news, and they loved me really well. And I came back to school would have been my junior year, and just knew that I was supposed to go in the church. So finished my career or my degree, and then just moved into the church. And over about 20 years, moved more and more towards a more reformed expression of the faith, which we'll describe here in a minute.
You met your wife at Colorado State. She was telling me.
Yep. Met Sarah at Colorado State. So we've been married for 23 years now, and we have 3 daughters. My oldest daughter is a senior. This is her last semester at Colorado State, so she'll be graduating in graphic design. And then I have a daughter that goes to El Centro, downtown Dallas. She's in her second year there, and then I have a high school. So my youngest daughter's in high school.
That's a college.
El Centro is part of the Dallas Community College system, but yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, yep.
So Pastor Brent, you're Anglican. Okay. A lot of people, when they think of it, now a couple, in full disclosure, Allison, who co-hosted last semester, and Ethan, who's our producer of the show and all the podcasts, came down and we interviewed the rector, the senior pastor, so to speak, of St. Andrews. But a lot of people look at a church like St. Andrews is kind of Catholic-y, like it comes across very high church, like almost like Roman Catholic, but it's not. It's Protestant, right? So can you explain, like, what does it mean to be Anglican? What does it mean to be Protestant?
Yeah, I mean, well, as you know, Lee, I mean, Anglicanism is a bigger question. So I'll set that aside for a second. To be Protestant, again, goes back to that Reformation. So it's a historical reality, and a lot of people think, well, that was just like an intramural debate, between the Roman Catholic Church and this guy named Martin Luther and his, kind of his band of followers. But it was bigger than that. There was reformations that were already going on. 200 years actually prior, you have a guy by the name of John Wycliffe who had already started the Reformation.
John Huss.
And it was
John Huss.
Sorry, what's that?
Huss too. There was a guy Huss, right?
Yes.
Okay, that was another one, right?
So so that was approximately about the same time as Wycliffe. But the basic idea is, like, with Luther, is he didn't want to leave the church. And you got to understand, at this time there was one church. Really, there was two. There was the Eastern Orthodox Church, and there was the Roman Church. And so it wasn't like you could just go to church and like shop around like we have now in America, where you have churches, especially in Texas, like on every corner, every street, of all kinds, different kinds. You really had one church if you were in the Western world, that you could choose from, and they controlled pretty much everything. And so Luther was going up against essentially the authorities. And the church had slowly shifted away from its key message. And I'll summarize that key message, because I think that helps us understand what Martin Luther was trying to get the church back to. And he was going back to early sources. He was going back to the early Christians, the early church fathers, and he was going back to the scriptures, the Apostle Paul and Peter and John and these guys. But the key message that Martin Luther wanted to get the church back to, and you got to listen to this because I phrase this intentionally, is that God helps those who cannot help themselves. So in American Christianity, the message that's going out in many of our churches, and this is I point the finger at myself, this is our fault, the pastor's faults, but the message that tends to go out in American Christianity is that God helps those who help themselves. So like God sort of comes halfway and meets us halfway. And that's where the Roman Catholic Church had gotten to in their theology. And the church was kind of the mediator. The priestly caste was like the mediator of this. And you had to tap into the priest to be able to get God's grace to meet you kind of halfway. You came halfway, God came halfway, and the priest was the mediator. And Martin Luther had lived in that. He tried it out, and he came to a personal crisis. Like, it didn't actually help him when he actually realized that he was broken himself. Like, it was okay when he had other people to compare himself to and say, oh yeah, I'm better than those people. But when he started to look at his own heart and his own self, he realized that this theology of God helping me if I come halfway, it wasn't measuring up. And so he started going back to the original sources, back to the Apostle Paul, and rereading those scripture texts. And he came to the conclusion that the early church's message was that God helps those who cannot help themselves. One of my favorite pastors, Lee knows this, he's no longer living. He just died in this last year, Tim Keller. He was a pastor in downtown New York, so not an easy place to start a church.
Manhattan, New York.
Yeah, but Tim Keller Tim Keller proclaimed this message, the central message of Christianity, and his church grew like crazy because urban professionals were really attracted to this reformational message that God helps those who cannot help themselves. And I'll explain why in a minute, but this is what he says. He said that we, and he's talking about all people. He says, we tend to be more sinful, and I'm going to use that word. That's a theological word, but we tend to be more sinful than we dare believe. But we are more loved and accepted in Jesus Christ than we dare hope. And again, that's another way of saying that same thing, that the way that God comes to help those who can't help themselves is through this idea of understanding that, we spend a lot of our lives cleaning ourselves up on the outside. At least I do, right? I mean, I try to, I know where to put a mask on, and, certain people are safe to talk to, and other people, you just kind of smile and you kind of go through the motions. And oftentimes what happens is we don't go deep and realize how broken we really are. And we don't want to believe that about ourselves. We want to believe that we're actually better off than we really are. And so we tend to think that we're better than we really are. But then what happens is we also don't really believe that we're fully loved and accepted for who we are. And that's where the message of the gospel, that what Christianity has always taught, is that Jesus came to show us how much God really loves us. And he meets us where we are in our brokenness in order to lead us into the life that he's created us for. And that's really what Martin Luther wanted to get back to. I mean, that's really simplistic, and that's kind of the 30,000-foot view. It didn't go well for him. The church didn't welcome his message because, again, he was challenging the authorities. The Roman Catholic Church was teaching that the magisterium embodied in the Pope was the final interpreter and the final authority of all things regarding the faith. And so here you have this monk coming along saying, no, actually, our final authority is guys like the Apostle Paul, written in the scriptures. Like, we can go back to the scriptures, and that's our final authority. And here's the message that God helps those who can't help themselves. And the church said, no, we need to shut this down. And that's what started it. And so essentially Martin Luther and many followers of his and many people like him that embrace the same message, they got kicked out of the church. And so then once you get kicked out of the church, you have to ask yourselves, well, what do we do? And that's when they started their own churches. So obviously Luther started what became known as the Lutheran Church, and you had others, including in England, which became the Church of England.
So, Pastor Brent, one of the most controversial movies that's come out in my lifetime, and this is kind of before some of you guys' time, but there was a movie in the early 2000s that came out. Mel Gibson was actually the producer of the movie, called The Passion of the Christ. Mm-hmm. It was kind of a crazy movie because it was all in Latin.
All in Yiddish or something.
No, Latin. It was all in Latin. The whole thing was in Latin. I think there's some phrases that were maybe a different language, but that movie, for all its controversy and problem, was a phenomenal at showing what Jesus Christ went through on the cross. The insane torture, things that Jesus went through. Christ died on that cross. A lot of people, we talk about, we see necklaces of the cross on there. We go by churches, we see a cross. It's so embedded in American culture. But you mentioned a couple times this thing of the gospel. What is the gospel, and how does it relate to the cross of Jesus Christ? What is the cross of Jesus Christ part of the Christian message still, or is it central to it? Or how is the death and resurrection of Jesus, how is that connected with the gospel, or what is the gospel?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of questions embedded there. The gospel just simply comes from, it just means news. It just means proclamation. And so it's a message. And Christianity has always been centered around a message that's meant to be proclaimed. It comes from the Greek word euangelion, which is where we get the word evangelical. Now, evangelical is like a bad word in the 21st century, especially in 21st century America, to many people. And so I would encourage anyone, if that's your first response, that's okay, but you really have to go back to the original roots and just understand that all evangelical means is news, good news. And it's this news, again, that God sent Jesus to essentially live the life that we have failed to live and to die the death that I deserve to die. So yeah, to answer your question, Lee, the cross is central to Christianity, and what happened there. So
we have a little bit of static on this when you're speaking in particular.
Okay.
But that's a phenomenal message. Now, something you guys don't know, many years ago, many moons ago, I was viciously opposed to Christianity. I tell people I was kind of like Kurt Cobain with hair at that time. Kurt Cobain without the musical ability. I was just viciously opposed to Christianity. I would just listen to alternative music, not Christian music. I'd go to all these punk rock bands. Some people they would like. I saw bands like the Dead Kennedys, in concert live, and
my dad saw them in concert.
Let me think. One of those major punk? I saw the Clash in concert. Black Flag. I saw these. One time I was at some church and some kid was wearing a Black Flag T-shirt, and I said, "Hey man, I saw that band." He goes, "No way."
I mean, that's really cool.
I saw Black Flag. I saw all these bands. I was viciously opposed to Christianity. I remember I was working one of my first jobs out of high school, and I had this pin or something in my backpack that had a slash through the cross. Like, I don't want anything to do with Christian. And this girl hit me up on it at work. "I don't like your pin, man." I go, "Why? What's wrong with that?" "What are you talking about?" She said, "I'm a Christian. That's wrong." She said, "There's no one better than Jesus Christ." I go, "What? What are you talking about? Who's Jesus Christ? What are you talking about?" I mean, I had some residual Sunday school knowledge of Jesus. When I was a kid, my mom would give me 50 cents and I'd keep one quarter, put the other quarter in the the plate. But I didn't really have any kind of knowledge. And to somebody, I remember these guys were having a Bible study at the University of Michigan campus. I was around, that young age, 18, 19 years old. And I was mocking them. I said, "What does the Bible have to do with anything? That's stupid." And this guy just turned around. He says to me, "If you say that the Bible is not true, you've made Jesus Christ out to be a liar." I go, "What? I'm not saying Jesus." And something hit me in the heart. I'm saying, I think Jesus is a great religious leader. I'm not against him, but I'm not calling him a liar. He goes, if you say Jesus Christ is not God, you've made him out to be a liar, because he says that he's God, that he's equal with the Father. Brent, do you believe that Jesus Christ is God? Or was he just a good moral teacher like Buddha or Confucius or some religious leader? Are you really saying that Jesus is God?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what Scripture says. So,
guys, can you go get Ethan?
Yeah, I could get him real quick.
He's in the front office.
Castellanos.
Prop that door open, okay? Because every time you speak now, Pastor Brent, it's staticky.
See if the AirPods.
You want me to let me try this.
Try that.
Can you speak?
Right now?
Are you on, Brent?
Oh, no.
No, he's got a...
Is that better?
Oh, no.
Wow. There's some issue.
Yeah.
Get it fixed.
And the Christians would say, "This is a devil. This is the devil." But Pastor Brent, in two, we're going to have a tech guy come in here real quick, see if we can fix this.
Yeah.
But we want to say to you, man, now I agree with you. I'm playing devil's advocate with you, that I'm just, for our listeners out there. But something, Pastor Brent, go ahead, speak again, see if it's still staticky.
Test.
Yeah, it's definitely full static. And you were doing great. It's just it got progressively worse. Did you guys hear it? Something happened. But we have enough content from you to have this podcast. But Pastor Brent, before he comes in, I just want to say, if I was just going to tell you from what my observation of Brent Christian is, besides his uber love for the Colorado Avalanche, that he has a genuine faith in Christ that's admirable. Now, Ethan, because you're editing this, every time he speaks, it's really staticky now. He's gonna. Sorry about this, Pastor Brent. He's gonna.
No, it's all right. I got time.
Wait, hold on. It's just he just said something that it didn't go static.
Was it fine? Is it fine now?
Oh yeah.
You're fine now. Okay, Ethan.
So I guess Ethan just needs to stay in the room.
Stay here the whole time.
Stay here the whole time, Ethan.
Your presence.
About 10 minutes, Ethan. So
Man.
just stick around. That's a nice overcoat.
That's what I said.
What's that? You get that from Banana Republic?
Wow,
that's pretty nice.
It is.
I know it.
Can I just
go ahead.
Speak to why I think that good news, at least the central message of Christianity that the Reformation wanted to get back to, why I think it meets our culture, where our culture needs to be met?
Sure.
Yeah, because I see, like, in our culture, I think there's a couple trends. First of all, I think we're very merit kind of based, and that leads to a moralism, at least in the church. It leads to this idea that we have like this list of rules, and it's kind of like, these are the things you should not do, and these are the things you should do. And that's how Christianity is oftentimes portrayed. And that's really not, that's not the heart of the message of Christianity. So you have that, the merit based, but then we also live, because of that, we live in a time where I think we just have a hard time forgiving people. And so, like, you see that and I'm not talking about little things, obviously, like what you experienced, Brock, with like justice needs to be had. But I'm talking just in like social media. Like, I mean, literally somebody can live a whole life and have a whole career and make one mistake, and their entire life can be ruined.
Cancel.
And that's on all sides. This is not like a right or left issue. This is this is both ways, right? And it's kind of a scary, I can't imagine being your guys' age. I'm not speaking of you, Lee, speaking of the other men in the room. But being your guys' age, I can't imagine the stress that brings. I see it in my own daughters, and I see it, even in my own life. But just like, first of all, you have to have all these merits, right, to be able to get a job in the culture we live in. You got to have your resume already and have everything, lined up so you can get a job. Then you're going to go out there, and if anything shows up on social media about your past, any mistake you've ever made, anything you've said, anything you've written, anything you've posted, and that gets out, your entire career that you've worked towards can be destroyed. And what happens then is that leads people who, they put all their hope in that, right? Career success, making it, they get ruined. And if they don't have this good news message, they then swing to the other side, to despair. And it can lead to just not just discouragement, but utter despair, where their life is completely done and they have nothing to live for. And I think, I'm not saying Christianity is the only answer, although I do think it's the best answer to meet people, us, who live in this kind of environment. Because again, the basic message is that God is there to help us, that we are actually more sinful than we dare to believe. Like, I'm actually broken. And if you knew more about me, Lee, you probably wouldn't even, you would have a lesser view of me because of the brokenness that I still struggle with. And yet I'm confident that I'm more loved and accepted in Jesus Christ than I could ever imagine or hope. And when you have that kind of news, that kind of message, you don't have to like work for it. It simply is just a message. It's just true, right? When the news hits the desk, you either believe the news or you don't. I mean, you could spin it and say that's fake news, but if it's real news and it hits the desk, you can either say, okay, that's really true, or it's not. That's what the message of Christianity is. It literally is just like a newspaper hitting the deck or the table, and you have to say, okay, is that real or not? And I'm saying that it is, and it's the real message that can actually change the world, which is why the best versions of Christianity have done just that. Now, the Christians have done a lot of bad things too, and I think we have to be the first to say that. But if you look at the history of Christianity and all of the messiness, you see Christians with this message really meeting people with where they're at. So if Jesus meets us where we're at, then that just spurs us to go out. That encourages us to go out and meet others where they're at. And that doesn't deny justice. That doesn't deny justice in society. So, Brock, I hope those guys get caught. I hope they have to be brought to justice. But I also will say this: I hope that through the process, those two guys will come to know this message of Jesus if they don't already know it, and that will change their hearts so that they won't try to take advantage of other people, maybe in even a worse way than they did for you. Yeah. So
because Jackson Carter Pohlmeyer has that incredible congressional running name, and because he's kind of our esoteric guy of our podcast. Like his show is, I would say, out there, to be truthful with you. And that's why each week I always usually have him talk about Alter States, but time's running out. This weird movie from the 80s. But you talk about religious stuff. Mm. You had like a warlock on your show a couple weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
So is there any pushback, anything you want to push back at with Pastor Brent before we let him go? Because I don't want to, because one thing about the Enochs show, it's a controversial podcast. We're not just up here just yes manning or yes women, we're basically, we cover issues, we debate issues, we talk about issues. And I know you as a person out there, a connoisseur of different religions and stuff, you might have some things that cross your mind when he was talking. Is there anything you want to say, challenge him on, or bring up a question before you let him go?
I can't say, I don't want to necessarily like challenge him on anything, but I grew up Christian. I wouldn't consider myself Christian anymore, but I'm like very familiar with, a lot of the teachings. I could speak to cancel culture, whatever, but since we're talking about the Reformation and Jesus and all this, we're getting into it. I think, since I'm not a Christian, I don't necessarily recognize Jesus as, I mean, I don't think like Jesus is God, I guess, but as a teacher, like a spiritual teacher, he's, right up there, like the pinnacle. And since we're talking about the Reformation, I think that the parallels between what Jesus did and what Martin Luther did are really interesting because, we talked about the cross and everything. And essentially the reason that Jesus got crucified was because he was, rising up against the, established order. The Jewish people were, being oppressed under the Romans. And so they had to function a certain way. And it had sort of taken spirituality out of the hands of all of the people and had put it into the hands of, a small group, the middleman that you were talking about, that were supposed to pass on the spirituality. But that's not really how spirituality works. Spirituality is a personal connection with whatever force you want to, take into yourself, personal connection with Jesus, personal connection with Krishna, whatever, Buddha. And that's what Martin Luther was trying to do too. The Roman Catholic Church had become this huge oppressive system of and there's the whole thing with indulgences and all of that,
Yeah, of course.
But he took it and he tried to put it back in the hands of the people, make people responsible for their own, spiritual practice. And I think that's a really important message to take away from both of them, because it's, you can go to church and listen to the sermons and, take away a few little lessons from it. But the real important practice is, trying to actually convene yourself with, whatever higher force it is that you're seeking.
Yeah, and I think those are some good points. I think the Reformation, like Martin Luther specifically, would say that, in a Christian sense, what you would do is return to the sources, right? So you would take up the scriptures and read. And so my encouragement to anyone, and I'm not here to like convince anyone, but just in a conversational sense, I would say to anyone who's saying, okay, I wonder if this Jesus that I was taught, let's say I grew up in the Christian church, and I'm trying to wonder if this Jesus is who I was taught. I would encourage you to go back to the sources, go ad fontes, go back to the original source of Scripture, and maybe take up the Gospels, right? Take one of the Gospels and just read it on its own terms, and read it in like one sitting. Just sit down and say, okay, the Gospel of Mark, take you maybe 30 minutes and read it on its own terms, and try to say, okay, what is the message that Mark is trying to communicate, and not to try to deconstruct Mark, but just say, I'm going to take Mark on his own terms. I'm going to give him credit that he knew what he was doing, and he's writing this short book to portray the message of Jesus. And I would be interested to see after doing that, kind of some of the observations or questions, and take that, filter that through your growing up. And I'm not just pointing you out for any of us, right? Just take that and I did that. I grew up in the church, but I never bought into it. And when I went back and I reread some of the original sources, particularly the Gospels, it was like a wake up. Like, I was like, wow, this is not what the church was not teaching what I just read. And I've seen that time and time again, especially in our the 21st century. I've read the Bible for the first time with countless peoples, and just let the Bible on its own terms kind of speak. And it's fun to see people process and ask spiritual type questions of the Bible and see what the Bible has to say for itself. Not necessarily what I grew up with when I went to church, or I was forced to go to church, or others as well. So,
well, our producer Ethan just pointed out we've been on for about an hour now. We got to
of course.
Pastor Brent, you're always welcome to come on here. You might come up to me in church and say, hey, I want to go over something again. Can I come back on? You're welcome anytime to come back on the podcast. You guys, I see tremendous gifts in all of you. And I know that might sound hokey, kind of like, oh man, what, here comes
I appreciate
here comes
it.
Lee. Here comes Lee again. He's getting into this whole thing, grandpa stuff again. But no, I wouldn't have you guys on. I wouldn't have you guys on if I didn't see gifts in you guys. Okay, and I believe in you guys fully. Each of you got gifts. I believe you're created in the image of God. You have worth, and you've got personal dignity. We live in a culture, like Pastor Brent talked about, of despair. There's so much despair and darkness in this world. And I think I see in you guys a lot of God-given abilities. I want to see you guys flourish in your gifts. And as long as I'm here at UNT, you guys are welcome on the show. And we'll keep talking in the future. Pastor Brent, we'll see you next week. And sorry, a little staticky, but we'll have Ethan try to figure out what to do with that. But appreciate you so much. Pastor Brent, we'll let you go, and we'll see you hopefully this weekend, okay?
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
All right,
Thank you, Pastor Brent.
Yeah.
All right, bye now. So we should just log off, right? Well, you guys, this has been the Lee Enoch Show, and I know it's a little staticky out there. But you guys, it's been an honor to have you all on. Sorry, Brock, that's occurred.
Yeah, it's all good.
Dude, you got robbed at UNT, bro. I can't stress how horrible that is. But I'm glad you're alive, bro.
For sure.
Glad you're alive. You guys finished the semester strong as scholars. Finish the semester strong. Keep your podcast going. And we'll talk to you next time, all right?
All right, sir.
Take care, guys.